We will educate you. We will educate you. We will educate you. Good afternoon, everybody. That was a little weird, and I have no clue where that came from.
Yes, we definitely did not spend our Friday night forcing him to make that video.
Well, that's of course what big sisters are for, but anyway, not to get sidetracked more than we need to. I want to give you guys, before we get started on Rule 2, I want to give you guys a little bit of a review on Rule 1. Now, as you guys remember, Rule 1 was stand up straight with your shoulders back. And of course, a little bit on that is it shows us how to react in a chaotic world as Christians, right? As people in general, of course, but most importantly, as Christians. It's being competent, being resilient, being confident despite everything, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to show others how Christians are supposed to react in situations, of course, like health issues, like the coronavirus and things like that. So please be sure, if there are any other questions aside from that, that's of course a general consensus, but any other questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer any of those questions for you guys. Okay, but moving on to Rule 2. Rule 2 is treat yourself like someone you're responsible for. Okay, so something that kind of pulls at me is, why even bring something up like this, something that seems like such a foundational, such a simplistic concept, and something that really elaborates on this and allows us to delve deeper into this rule is, why won't we take our medicine? This is a question that Jordan Peterson poses for us. And I'd love to kind of hear what your thoughts are, Lauren.
Yeah, so the chapter starts off with the question, and why won't we take our pills? And he kind of breaks it down for us, that if we have a dog or, whatever pet you may have, and you take it to the vet, yes, iguana, lizard, snake,
whatever it may be,
raccoon. But if you take that pet to the vet and you're told, your pet has this sickness, you need to give the pet this medication, and you need to do it twice a day, 4 hours a day, whatever the case is, we will definitely fill that medication, administer the medication how it's supposed to be done, kind of to a T. But if we go to the doctor's office ourselves and we're told, you need to fill this prescription, you need to take this for however long, probability is that a lot of us won't even go and fill that prescription. And even if we do fill the prescription, probability is even more of us will not even take it correctly. So he's kind of laying out for us that we at times hold ourselves to a lower standard than others, and other people and even animals we hold to a higher standard than ourselves. In a way, we have more value in the animals or our family members, whoever it may be, than the value we have in our own self.
And what we're going to establish moving forward and looking at this rule is that, in essence, what we end up doing when we do stuff like that, when we value everybody else above ourselves, is we limit our ability to give 100% of ourselves, because we're not really giving the necessary attention to be able to give that 100%. Okay, so to expound on this question of why won't we take our medicine, I want us to take a look at the golden rule. Now, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, it states, "Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets." Now, what Jordan Peterson does is he looks at this, and of course, I think he says something about getting it from a psychologist by the name of Carl Jung. And what they do is they flip the golden rule to better understand the fundamentals behind that golden rule that is so much more than just, of course, being nice. So the reciprocal version of it would be treat yourself as you would have others treat you. And I think a good illustration of this would be the relationship between a parent and their child. And when you look at the relationship between a parent and their child, you kind of see that if you're a good parent, you want your child to be the best version of themselves. You want your child to be a functioning individual in society. And they can't do that if everyone is just nice. If everyone is just nice to them or everyone is just pampering them, you end up getting a spoiled brat, essentially. And you don't want that, of course. As a good parent, you want your child to be able to trust. You want your child to be able to be aware of their surroundings. You want them to be somebody that could be independent. And what were you gonna say? Nothing. Okay, nothing. She wasn't gonna say anything. I thought she was. It's just interesting. But you want your child to be someone that is responsible. And you can't do that if you're just surrounding them with people that are gonna googly eye them all the time.
Condone what they're doing.
Condone what they're doing, yes.
Basically, if you look at the golden rule kind of like, I guess in a deeper lens, it's not so much treat people nice all the time because you would want to be treated nice all the time. I mean, if you are striving to be the best version of yourself, then you would want to be told if you're doing something wrong, if you're incorrect.
Absolutely.
So you would want someone, a friend, a spouse, parent, whoever, to care about you enough to let you know when you are doing something wrong. Yep. And that's essentially what this is saying, is you want to be the best version of yourself. So you should want others to be the best version of themselves. So basically, if I'm not doing something right, I would want you to tell me.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing something right, I need to tell you.
Yeah, it's how would you want to be treated? How would you actually want to be treated?
Yes, and also, even more, not so much, hey, you're doing this wrong, you need to fix yourself. Or, hey, you're living in this sin, you need to get out of it. Because it's all about how we say it too. Like if we don't say it in love, it means nothing.
Absolutely.
1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah.
We sound like a clanging cymbal at that point.
Yeah.
If we don't have the love factor behind it, if our intentions are not, I love you so much, I want you to be better.
Yeah. Instead
of, you're beneath me and I'm above you. You need to come up to my level.
Yeah. And I think why won't you take your medicine, right? Why things like Genesis 1-4, which is something we're going to talk about, goes into the golden rule, of course, goes into why we just don't seem to value ourselves to go to that extent, right? We don't value ourselves to treat ourselves with a sense of respect, to provide ourselves with the tools necessary to be able to give people more, treat others how you want to be treated. Well, how do you want to be treated? What does that look like?
Right. How are we going to know how to treat others how we want to be treated if we don't know how we want to be treated?
Yeah,
because we don't have the value in ourselves.
Yeah, if we don't love ourselves, and I'm not talking about the selfish love. I don't want to go into that. But loving yourself, it goes back to what Lauren was saying about, sometimes you have to be able to course correct. Right? Loving yourself is, hey, what am I eating? Am I working out? And most importantly, as a Christian, it's what am I taking in? Right? Am I spiritually feeding myself enough? Am I surrounding myself with the proper people? Because then if you want those things for yourself, of course you're going to want those for other people. Of course you're going to be able to impart that wisdom on other people so much more efficiently and so much more effectively.
And I think to go even deeper into this about the value of our own selves, we have to, if we're doing what we're supposed to as far as delving into the word like we are, we can understand our value on a whole other level.
Yeah.
And this kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with my grandmother where we were talking about social media, how social media can kind of be a poison for our value in ourselves. We look for how many people are following us, how many people are liking our pictures or our posts, and that's kind of where we put our self-esteem. Like, you feel low in your self-esteem, let me post a picture so someone can help my self-esteem. Tell me I'm pretty, tell me that I'm right in the way I'm living my life.
Yeah, it's predicated on everything else other than the things that are necessary, like God and ourselves.
Right. And I was talking to my grandmother, and I asked her, why is he or she acting like this? Why do they do this? Why such low self-esteem? And she told me this, and it has just stuck to me like glue ever since. She said, they don't know the value that they have in Christ. Therefore, they're searching for their value in other people. Absolutely. And if you find yourself in that predicament, you're always going to be dissatisfied. You're always going to be searching for more. And that's the importance of delving into the word, is the more you do that, the more you see like, wow, I'm this valuable, that he would even, because imagine if we didn't even have this. We'd be lost.
Absolutely.
But we were so important for us to have this gift, this tool to use throughout life. And more importantly, obviously, his son dying on the cross. We were that valuable. Yeah. That he sent his son to do that for us.
Yeah, and I think Genesis chapter 1-4 actually gives us this beginning snapshot of how it all began. Yes. Right? It shows us. So, and we'll delve right in. Right? So chapter 1 shows us creation. Right? He creates the waters, he creates the land, he creates the animals, he creates us. He's going through this process of just creation, and we see just how much he values us, because at the end of chapter 1, at the end of all of the stuff he's creating, it states, chapter 1 verse 31, then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So everything that he had made, everything that he had created was good. It had value to it. And then in chapter 2, it goes into, the garden and the establishment of the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. And it sets the stage for the thing that sets us apart from so many of the other creatures, so many of the other animals that were created, and that's choice. We were always provided with a decision to do the right thing, to choose to love God. And that's one of the many things that makes us so special and places value in us, that he trusted and he loved us enough to give us that decision. And then it goes further, and it talks about Eve coming to be from Adam. And then of course the temptation and the fall of man. And of course we see their nakedness come into play, and how they didn't know they were naked. They were innocent. They didn't understand the concept of good and evil, but after they took of that fruit, all of a sudden they saw their nakedness. They saw their wretchedness, right? They were able to see these things that they never saw before. And then as we move further, we of course see the consequences, because for every decision there are of course consequences,
positive or
negative. And that's where the value comes in. That's what we're talking about, that's established so far back that we see now, right? Is that for some reason, as people that are living currently, we still have this sense of guilt, this sense of disgust in who we are and what it is we're capable of as human beings. This understanding that we can sin, and that we understand that other people can sin. And so in essence, we rob ourselves of this opportunity to do right by ourselves. We rob ourselves of the opportunity to do right by others. And in chapter 4, what we see is Cain and Abel. And we see we see Cain giving of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. And then we see Abel giving of his firstborn of his flock, and that's in verse 4, and to offer up to the Lord. And we, of course, we go further on, and we see that God didn't like Cain's offering, but he accepted Abel's offering. So what stuck out to me in this chapter is the decision, is the choice that Cain had whilst he was looking at his ideal. It was established the way he felt. It said in verse 5, he said, but he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry and his countenance fell. And the Lord saw this. So in verse 6 it says, so the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why has your countenance fallen? Verse 7, if you do well, will you not be accepted? Here's a choice. Won't you be accepted if you do the right thing? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. So what I also want us to look at before we wrap chapters 1 to 4 up is chaos and order. So we see order at the beginning, then we see chaos enter with sin. Then we see the reestablishment of order when he goes, and Lauren's going to go into this, is going to go into this reestablishment of order because, as I said before, there are consequences. And then we see God establishing order. Look, if you do the right thing, this is what's, he's saying, do the right thing. Like, in short, do the right thing.
This is a trend throughout, especially all of the Old Testament.
All of Israel, yes.
With the Israelites, which we won't even delve into that.
Yeah.
But the whole chaos and order thing, but it's obviously established here. And we can even get down to the very fundamentals of the chaos and order. In chapter 1, verse 1, it pulls from like 5 elements of science. We have time, we have force, we have action, we have space, and we have matter. So, in the beginning, that's our time. God, that's our force. Created, that's the action. The heavens, which is the space, and the earth, which is the matter. So he established, order right there. And he, gave us all the night and day, the oceans and the dry land, the fish of the sea, birds of the air.
Each having its own functions,
yes.
Right? There's the order in it.
Each builds off of each other, and eventually he gives us the beast of the ground and humans, first man, then woman, and that he gives them this beautiful garden, this life with no sin, this purity, really, that he gave us. And the chaos comes in when Adam and Eve make their choice to bring sin into the world, to be the parents of sin, essentially. So obviously they eat of the fruit that God told them, no, that is the one tree that you don't pick from. I've given you all this. That's the one place that you don't pick from. Of course, Satan, tempts them. They eat of it, and God's anger is shown. Their eyes are opened. They know that they're naked when they didn't know before. They know their shame. They know they've done wrong at that point. And God comes back down to them. He's angry. He's angry at the serpent. He's angry at his creation at that point. And he has to kind of establish order again. So in chapter 3, verses 15, he's talking, to Adam and Eve, but then he kind of switches up and he talks to Satan. So in verse 15 it says, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. And then he says, he shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. So right here, it's, believe it or not, this establishes the promise of Christ to come. So Old Testament is there to foundationalize Christ coming. That's been the plan, since the beginning of time. And what God is saying here to Satan is, you might bruise his heel. So it'll hurt, it'll be irritating because you have a wound on your foot, but he's going to bruise your head. So basically, he's going to take a blow to your head, which is more detrimental. And he's talking about you've bruised his heel right now with bringing sin into this world, but he's going to bruise your head when he's hung on that cross for the remission of those sins. So he's reestablishing the order right there. And then, of course, Adam and Eve go on to have their children. God brings the order of what kind of sacrifices he wants. Cain decides differently. You know, God always gives us order, and we kind of throw the wrench in his plans and make the chaos.
Yeah, and it's almost it's like, and the question is always posed, well, did Cain know what was, like, what he was supposed to sacrifice, right? But it says right here in verse 7, if you do well, will you not be accepted? Right? That right there establishes the fact that he had to have known what was right. He had to have known what would be accepted for God to ask him that question.
Right. And what God goes on to say about and if you do not do well, sorry, obnoxious driver. And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door and its desire is for you. So he's basically saying, like, this sin, like, it's fun, right? It's enticing. Always has been, always will be. And it's kind of, if you allow it in, it's going to keep knocking at your door until you answer its call. But he says, but you should rule over it. So basically, I'm never saying I'm not going to send a sin to you that you can't overcome.
Yeah.
It might keep knocking at you, keep tempting you, because it's not a sin to be tempted.
Yeah, and not
it's
so
a sin
much
to
of
yield to that temptation.
and not so much like him sending it to you, but it allowed to happen, right? Because it's the thing that I want everyone to understand is, you know, God's not going to send these things to us. He's not going to tempt us. He's not going to try to put us in a situation where we sin. It's more of, it's there. The choice is there. There's always going to be, this world isn't perfect, right? Obviously, coronavirus, everything going on, it's not perfect, but the choice is always there for us to make. And ultimately, as Christians, we're called on to make the right choice. And that's what I want us to understand, is that, you know, at the end of the day, here's the choices, make the right one. But I guess, of course, we can end chapters 1 through 4 and the understanding of chaos and order and how it plays into the golden rule is, of course, you guys know what happened to Cain, right? He made the decision, he made the wrong decision to, instead of looking at his ideal, his brother, which his brother was an ideal, he did the right thing, right? So in essence, he's an ideal. And instead of him living up to that ideal and doing the right thing and choosing the right thing by God and sacrificing what God had asked, instead he killed off his ideal. And that's what we do every single day when we make the decision to not value ourselves. When we make the decision to, when we see something that can be best for us, which is, of course, right, doing the right thing, choosing the right thing, we instead want to downplay it. We instead want to down the people around us that can be those ideals. We instead want to kill the good parts of us because they could be embarrassing or they make us look like we're trying to be high and mighty. No, don't take away from what you're capable of because of the people around you, because they can benefit so much more if you can fulfill that potential. And that's what we want to challenge you guys to do today, is to fulfill that potential, to look at your ideal, to look at chaos and order and strive for order despite being in a chaotic world. And that's what treating yourself like someone you're responsible for is establishing. So something I want us to leave off on is 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20. Okay, Lauren, could you turn to that for me? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20.
it says, "For you were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's."
Please, thoughts. I'd love to know your
I mean, I
thoughts
feel
on
like
that.
this kind of just...
This speaks for itself, but...
Right, it does. And it's... We could go, like, into a 30-minute session about this one, but...
But it brings us full circle.
Right, it does. Something I have been told in the past as well is Jesus, holiest of holy, came down for the, I guess, unholiest.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Let me just read the verse again.
Should you just cut that? We'll cut that.
Cut.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Just tell me when you're ready.
do you want me to just start reading the Bible verse?
Start reading the Bible verse.
Okay. It states, "For you were bought at a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's."
Okay. So I'd love to know your thoughts, because of course this brings us full circle, right? As you were talking about before, the bruising of the heel, right? And then the bruising of the head.
Right.
So it's like, wait a second, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right?
So
Christ's sacrifice.
first
and
of
then
all, what does it mean when it says you were bought at a price? You know, who was the purchaser that bought us at a price? You know, it was Christ.
Yeah.
It was God. God through Christ sent his son, and Jesus paid the ultimate price by hanging on the cross, by taking on the sin of the world and being that ultimate sacrifice that we need to have redemption. So I've heard it been explained before that Jesus, who is, you know, the holiest of holy, the cleanest of clean, the purest of pure, came down for the dirtiest, nasty, grimiest, you know, people who've ever been here. There is no, I guess, favoritism. It's not, he picked and chose who he died for. He brought on all the sin of the world. Even those who hate him, those who don't care for him, they were all bought at the same price that we were.
Yeah.
We just made that choice to follow his commandments.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we don't know that we have value by just that verse alone, then
I mean, we don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I don't got nothing else for you.
So, I mean, and I guess I'll wrap it up for you guys this afternoon. I want to ask you guys a couple questions, and I really want you to dwell on this as you're going throughout the rest of this week, the rest of your lives. These are serious questions, and we just kind of pass over them, and that's why when I ask, treating yourself like someone you're responsible for, this is something that is super foundational, super simplistic. It's because that's how we look at it. We never act on it. And I want you guys to ask yourself the question, when we're looking at something like treating yourself like someone you're responsible for, are you considering your value? Are you considering the price that you're bought at? It's something that is beyond any value, anything we could ever imagine. Are you going to treat yourself like someone you're responsible for?